This is Eileen Griffin with the Heartland View from the Heartland Daily News, bringing you information and analysis about public policy stories that affect your life, your health, your freedom, and the nation's economy. So this week, let's just jump right in. We've got a couple of stories about freedom. Freedom is very important, and we've been kind of focusing on freedom for a while. So we're going to zero in on your freedom today. We've got a story about property rights, and we've got another update on big tech and freedom of speech. So let's start with the property rights story. So this, we told you about this before, so this is sort of a follow-up, but it's an interesting outcome. So we told you about the farmer in California. He raises strawberries, and he was trying to prevent union organizers from coming on his property. Now, when this was going on, the farmer said, look, I don't mind if you talk to, I'm not trying to prevent you from talking to my workers. You're certainly able to talk to workers, but just don't do it during work hours and on work property. So he told them they could communicate in a number of different ways, but the union organizers refused. They insisted on coming on his property, and they insisted on doing it during work hours. So he took this to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said he was correct. Property rights are important, and he has the right, as the owner of that property, to prevent people from coming onto his land. So, very good outcome for anybody that cares about property rights, the ability to own your own property, and that's a central piece of our country and part of our freedoms and what we live for and what we are excited about, and what we believe is part of the gift of being an American. And it's interesting to point this out now in the property right issue, because socialism is about having no property. Socialism is about everything being shared. And so then you don't have property rights, you don't have your own property. And so it's such a distinct difference. And so when you see a case like this, on the one hand, it's very encouraging to see that we're getting support for everybody's belief that we should have our own property rights. That's how we have always felt as Americans. We have our right to our property. But it's also interesting in terms of the implication for those who are on the side of centralized government, central control, to see that, you know, not all Americans are on board with that. We like our property. We like our freedom. We like to be able to control our own property. And now this farmer has made it more possible for a lot of people to stand up for property rights. So great for him, and great for all people that care about property rights and freedom in America. So good outcome on that story. So glad to share that with you. We're going to move on now to another story about freedom. We've been talking also about freedom of speech. And freedom of speech is very concerning in terms of social media. So we've been reporting on this for quite some time, but there's an update. So as we reported last week, that Facebook, we found out, was working with the White House to review posts, to review what you're looking at, what you're commenting on, and that should really concern anybody. So it does appear that Big Brother's at our doorstep. If Big Brother has the ability, Big Brother Biden in this particular case, to look at what you're posting on social media, do you really have freedom of speech? And we've already seen censorship. So if a social media platform chooses not to allow you to share what you want to share, say what you want to say, they're controlling your speech. So there's another article this week on Heartland Daily News, if you want to check that out, about this growth of this censorship and the growth of the interaction between our government, our leaders, our President Joe Biden, and these social media platforms. It's an interesting story. We'll keep you informed, but there is a little bit of pushback on this front. So the Heartland Institute has been taking this on. They've been taking a stand, and their group of over 40 conservative leaders, including Heartland, have signed on to an open letter. Led by Media Research Center President Brett Bozell, this letter brings together a bunch of conservative groups to push back and say, we're not okay with this. We're not okay with this collusion between the White House and social media. The letter says, quote, the Biden administration is ripping the U.S. Constitution to shreds. Its assault on America's freedom of speech is terrifying. It's the hallmark of dictatorships, end quote. Now, there's plenty of examples currently around the country to see where we're trying to push back. You've got a number of people at the state level that are also taking a stand and putting forth efforts at the state level. And if you want to see an example of why we should be fighting for freedom of speech, if you're unsure why this is such a big deal, you can look in current events today and see what's happening in Cuba. So in Cuba, their free speech is restricted, and people are fighting desperately for freedom, and particularly the freedom of speech, because that gives them the ability to talk to each other, share with each other, confer with each other. It gives them the ability to organize. It gives them the ability to share with the rest of the world what is happening to the people of Cuba. But they can't do it because social media right now is shut down for them. Because the people that run that country, they can do whatever they want. And they can shut out freedom of speech. They can shut out anybody's ability to get on the internet should they choose to do that. And that's what's happening. So the letter from the conservative groups goes on. I'll read it in part. It says, quote, as a result of the incendiary and dangerous announcements by the Biden White House last week to censor free speech with the cooperation of social media, we, the undersigned, demand big tech firms immediately and publicly announce that they will not comply with calls from the federal government to censor dissenting viewpoints, not on COVID-19 and not on any other topic. Furthermore, we call on these companies to resist further demands for such outrageous censorship of dissenting voices. The Biden administration is guilty of violating the most basic, fundamental principles of a free and open society. End quote. You can read the full letter on heartlanddailynews.com, but that's it for now. Just want to make sure you're aware of it. And the good news is there are people taking a stand, and it's important that people take a stand for our freedom of speech. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the economy. Let's talk about jobs. Jobs are really important. We know that. We've seen interesting things on the employment and unemployment front. So here's another story out of Florida. So Florida continues to have good news. So they gained more than 900,000 new jobs since last June. So over a one-year period, 900,000 new jobs in the state of Florida. That's incredible. And what's really important to note is that Florida's private sector has also dramatically increased. So in terms of whether it's public sector or private sector, it's really important when it's private sector because it's obviously not coming out of taxpayer dollars. So private sectors, innovation, entrepreneurship, growth of existing companies. So that's really exciting. And they tracked 378,000, more than 378,000 private sector jobs June to June over a one-year period. So Florida is just growing by leaps and bounds, tons of industry opportunities. They're just generating jobs right and left in a number of industries. So tourism, of course, because that's a big growth economy for them, but in other areas, in trade, transportation, utilities, education, health services, financial services, all of these industries with openings. So it's a very prosperous area of the country. Great opportunities. Of course, they were different in terms of how they handled COVID. They took a little bit more of a measured approach. They didn't go for the real draconian shutdowns like some states did. So they're going to bounce back quicker, of course. And adding jobs means more opportunities. And they're actually advertising outside of Florida. So they're advertising around the country, trying to entice people to come to Florida to take one of their jobs. Now, if you decide to uproot and go to Florida, just know you'll be a part of a large group of people. So there's people flocking to Florida for all kinds of reasons. Now you've got another one. Okay, one last thing for this week, and that's a comment on a comment. So on the message board last week, we had a comment from Fred about the report that we gave on regulation. And so there was a story from John Stossel last week about the regulatory environment and how people sometimes avoid regulation just because that's what they have to do to be able to innovate or to grow their business. So Fred points out also we need to comment about the legal issue. And it's a very good point. So he said it's this culture of I'll sue you for anything. And that's true. There's a big cultural problem in this country and people trying to sue for whatever reason. And that's also added to this burden. So I would say it's both, that we have some of the regulatory burdens come about not because of a lawsuit, but because a regulator creates a rule, and it depends on the industry, but you see that. But also this legal situation, we have a litigious nature to our culture. And people do have a tendency to decide they're going to sue somebody rather than taking self-responsibility. I agree with Fred's point that it's cultural, that we've accepted this in our culture. Instead of feeling like, should we really be doing it? Is it the right thing morally? Is it the right thing ethically? We've used the legal system in some cases to do things that maybe we should or should not do. And it's not everybody. There's just a certain segment of the culture that finds ways to enrich themselves at the expense of others due to the legal ability to do so. So thank you, Fred, for pointing that out. I appreciate it. Always appreciate comments. We've had a few. They're a lot of fun. Thank you for that. So please continue to do so. Please continue to share us on social media. We appreciate your attention and your time. If you want to see more information on these stories as well as many others, please go to the website, heartlanddailynews.com. And if you'd like to read more about the activities of the Heartland Institute and all the things that they're doing on your behalf to fight for freedoms, please go to the website, heartland.org. Thank you for your time. Thank you for listening. Have a great week.